Thank you, Samir. I think it was an amazing session. Thanks for you providing that actually the CTO flavor, that how do you continue to drive the digital transformation and how the things has changed. And we looked at that, how typically you should, while continue to follow the best practices, but continue to change towards that new approach, like compliance first approach or the security design led design approach. And one of the critical aspects that some you will have think here, Samir was talking lots of about board involvement, right? So next session, I will try to talk about some little more detail. I know we are running 10 minutes late, but don't worry about that. We'll try to cover. And we are not trying to rush through. But I think board roles in the today's is dramatically changing a lot when it comes to cybersecurity and the technology governance. All the CROs, CTOs, CISOs continuously getting called up by the board and try to understand that, okay, how do they need to respond? How do they need to get? So let me just bring up my screen and then, yeah. So I think any of the guidelines when it comes from the regulatory body, right? If you will see that there is a lot of emphasis on the having an oversight at the board level. Like, for example, if any policy need to be approved through the board, then it has to approve through the board. If any governance or committee structure has to be laid down to drive that, like whether IT governance or outsourcing or, say, for example, any other aspects, it has to be there. There has to be a kind of the committee structure, and the member has to be there to have an oversight into that. So that's where that, if you look at that, regulators also have been trying to put on that entire the governance structure driven through the board. But how the things are changing, right? So we spoke about lots of changing in terms of the technology adoptions or the digital banking transformation across bank, NBFCs, fintechs, as well as the non-financial institutions, right? Apart from the board, then you have the executive committee level of the structure where that IT steering committee or the management committee structure there, and where the members like CISO, CTOs, CROs are there, right? So lots of the things are there. So typically, if you look at it, the governance structure from the any regulatory entity perspective is concerned, you will have the independent directors where that need to be there. And then there has to be audit committee of the board, which is again independent, constitutional independent director, primarily to oversee all the kind of the audits which happens. Then you will have the risk management committee of the board, where that there primarily has to have a deeper oversight on the risk management part of it, as well as that you will have IT strategy committee, where that they are primarily responsible to drive the strategy or the technology agenda for the banks, right? So that's typically some of this oversight. But as an overall board, right, things has continuously changing a lot, and where that's what we see that, if you try to draw that typically from the technology and cybersecurity perspective, if you try to understand what are the role that they play, so definitely they need to involve into strategic planning, right? So they, through the IT strategy committee, they need to approve that IT strategy 3 years roadmap for the bank, and that board has to look at it. The budgetary allocation very structured, like that has to be put in place. As part of the strategy, that board need to look at that, okay, as the business goals or business objective which has been set, are they aligned with the strategy? Continuously emphasizing on the risk cultures, continue emphasizing the setting up the governance, that, okay, audit is happening, the reporting is appropriately happening or not, and then approval process, business continuity. So these are the traditionally that board has been playing. It's not that board has not been playing, board has been very active. But in the today's context, when the previous session you would have looked at, where the Samir was emphasizing that full of the transformation, like you have continues to have a bank fintech partnership, lots of the outsourcing, continuous increase in the risk profile, new technologies. Does the board also, that expectations continue to change, right? Or the board approach also continue to be changed? So I just try to, based on the discussion with various of the leaders in the industry in this aspect, try to gather some of the pointers, and we just quickly touch upon it. I think changing expectation, and this is again from everybody, from the regulator, definitely first thing, regulator also expect the board to be very actively get into that, right? Primarily responsible for the entire the governance. Let's say, for example, if any banks get, as Samir was talking about, that world has moved from the penalty late kind of an structure as part of the any non-compliance to the putting an embargo on the business itself. I think things have changed a lot, and where the board involvement comes in a deeper. So regulators also expecting. Executive committee and management also expect that the board should get very deeper into that, as well as that customer at large, right? So I think changing expectation is that board should ask lots more questions into today's context, right? If any new, like Gen AI is getting adoption, so there should be a question that how it is going to improve the business, as well as how it is going to change the risk landscape. So that's where the lots of the question engagement has to come from them. Then second, I think board has already started looking, or they need to look at that this all the weather technologies or the cybersecurity is not remain that technical, right? It's more of the business, because now in case of under certain non-compliance, like something the patch management, would typically not get into the very specific that okay, what is patch management or the change management that need to be there. But now they may sound in the technical in nature, but its impact is wider. Like certain compliances not been followed, it can lead to a kind of a derailment of the services to the customer, or can have an impact on the platforms that have been designed or built. So that's where the challenge is. So they continue to have that understanding and alignment that, okay, it's not technical, it's a business, right? And I think they should have the more of the conversation with the CROs and the CISOs as well as the CTOs. It's not limited to the when the board meeting happens and they come for the presentations and giving an oversight onto that, okay, what's happening, how the risk profile look like, or how the security landscape at the bank look like. Have a more conversation. If something is happening on the event, how the bank is responding, how the NBFC is prepared for those kind of the scenarios. And we have every day or other, every week, we have some or other incidents keeps on coming, or some other impact which is being notified by the regulators, right? Also continue to check that, okay, how the cyber threats and vulnerabilities are there, right? So that's where that they continue to look at, continue to evolve that, what are the technological needs, like say, for example, you see lots of the transformation is taking place. So how the bank is geared up to respond to those transformation needs. Lots of big bank fintech partnership as well. So are the banks are prepared to those fintech partnership to drive the new business, as well as are the banks also prepared to take care of those risks? So I'm just talking from the board perspective, right? So that's where that need to have the more conversations offline, online, whatever is required. And I think other than the very, very critical, I think that's also from my perspective, I feel that this is becoming very controlled. Now, if you look at the cybersecurity perspective, it's no more remain about just protecting the data, right? It's not about that, okay, cyber attack happened and the data breach happened. If the cyber attack happens, it could be the discontinuation of the business for a certain time or the longer time. It's all about putting the resilience. So board, at least board level, it's need to be very critical that they need to have a very different visualization of the risk, that it has moved from the data breach to the resilience. So need to have the more conversation as well as the approach towards look at it, that how the organization is prepared to be resilient. And that's why if you look at it, the recent operational guidelines, which has been released by, I think in April, on the risk management, most of the emphasis has been put on the resilience aspect, be it on the technologies, be it on the third party. So those are the very critical aspects that board need to have the deeper look at it. And definitely implement a right framework of the risk communication. So how the board communicate with the executive layer, senior management response control representatives, be it on the CISO, CROs or the CTOs, and how does this get communicated towards that the staffs which is at the grounds who are responsible to implement the controls, and as well as the participation in the industries, like industry bodies who are there, how to continuously engage with them and understand the risks. So it's like cyclical structure that you need to figure it out, that risks have been rightly been identified, measured, communicated, mitigated, and all these things. So these are some of the changing expectations for board, but it's not easy, right? Some of the organization may have the sufficient capabilities in the place to respond to these kind of the changing expectations, but some of them may not. So how the banks or the NBFCs are getting, and why I'm talking about NBFCs, because if you look at the large NBFCs, recent time, if you look at some of the circulars, I think most of the regulations which earlier applied to the banks and the upper layer of the NBFCs, it straight applies to the middle layer of NBFCs also. And many of them, they may not have the sufficient tech or people expertise to drive that. So I think board need to have the continuous engagement to understand the different technology trends, what is happening, how the different industries competitions are responding, what are the use cases that they are developing, as well as it will also give an opportunity to understand that, okay, what are the risks are emerging out of this adoption of new technologies, and how everybody is responding to that. Regulatory changes every month or the other, you see lots of the new regulations coming. So have a better understanding of the risk. As an example, outsourcing. If you look at the master direction or outsourcing of technology services, I think first time RBI came out very clarity that, okay, banks may able to go to the cloud adoptions, be it on the either going on cloud or through that adoption of, say, for example, SaaS platforms. Now, if they're going in the cloud, both need to understand that, okay, what are the challenges that cloud may be bringing on the table, be it on the SaaS platform, be it on the putting that own stack on the cloud. So those are the regulatory challenges I think that they need to. And it's more for the product challenges, knowledge also. And as Samir was talking about some of these things, compliance-led approach that today's cybersecurity, the risk management should be embedded in the digital product itself, right? Or the journey. So that's also very important that these journeys knowledge becomes very critical. And some of the things also need to go through some change in the board level reporting. Many of the organizations may already be addressing it on the putting in a right study business plan, and more from the technology and the cybersecurity perspective. I'm talking about it. What kind of the budget elements are there? What are the risks that organization is trying to address? What are the new risks emerging? Say, for example, you partner with, I'm talking about like say bank partners with any fintech for merchant cash advance kind of product, right? Where now the origination of the loan is happening from the partner side, and then you are processing. Now, it's bring out complete the DLG guidelines into picture. So how the risk changes into the whole process. The data is also now that the partner and as well as that the third party, right? So how the entire the risk profile changes. What are the cyber incident happening at your organization level as well as the industry? Can you get some kind of the mitigations knowledge from that and continue to have assessment? Benchmarking, I think this is very critical that can you look at that how your practices are there? What are the technologies that you are adopting, especially to manage the cybersecurity and the risk management? Can you do the benchmark with the others and try to learn from the industry experience? That always helps, like benchmarking has been helping bank to redefine the journey. Why not into the GRC practices? So that's where there. So with this, I'll take a pause. It was just wanted to have a quick short presentation, taking a cue from the previous discussion from Samir, that how the board roles continue to gonna engage into that. And that's where that we have been also involved into working with some of the board members to handhold in the process that how the entire the transition should, their transition should towards move to manage a better risk or technology oversight. So with this, I'll take a pause and continue with the agenda. I will just check whether we have any other questions. Okay, Joseph is asking question. Recently, bank partnerships with fintech have come into scrutiny in the US with the recent collapse of Synapse. Any comments regarding learnings of the Indian banking ecosystem? I think it's a wider question, but just a short answer. I'll try to take it that I think RBI's Indian regulator is very active into that space. They continue to look at that where the controls challenges may foresee, and they continue to take a response before it gets aggravated and has a large impact at the organization at large. Like, for example, DLG guidelines. So when organizations, when the regulators saw that, okay, digital lending partnership is continuing to increase, they try to bring out some of this kind of the mitigation measures, right? So that's where the things have been taking. I doubt that that kind of situation may emerge into the India at this stage, but yeah, you never know, right? So with this, I'll take a pause and continue the agenda. We have been talking about emerging technologies and how the impact is there. I have B. Karthik with me from HyperEdge. Thank you, Karthik, joining us. Okay, and he will talk about that, how the deepfakes is having an impact and how do you do the deepfakes checks and the dedupe checks. So there will be a product demos. So Karthik, over to you. Thank you for joining us.